I'm going to have him tell you all the places and all the boards that he is on, but it's so many that it's mind-boggling. He is involved in so many different areas of autism and education and the rights of people, children and adults on the autism spectrum in the classroom. He is an author, and some of his most recent books are so helpful to me at this point of time as my son gets ready to go into college, because he deals with the subject of how to make college life successful for people who are on the autism spectrum. But I'm so sorry, Dr. Shore, I've lost your bio on my screen, but let's bring him in here so I can apologize profusely and ask him to tell us a little bit more about him. Dr. Shore, welcome.
Well, it's great to be here, and no worries about losing my bio. It's all over the internet anyways. People can look it up. My doctorate is in special education. I started out with a bachelor's, master's, and all of the doctoral coursework in music education. But then after I finished my doctoral coursework in music education, I started getting more interested in autism. So I defected to the School of Education and got my doctorate in that. And you got the university right. I'm at Adelphi University. Here I am wearing the hat. It's always good to support your university whenever you can. And it's great to be here with you.
Thank you so much for being here. For people, I can't imagine, but if there's anybody who doesn't know you, one of the things that you're most famous for, the most famous thing ever said about autism is accredited to you. When you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. And we all acknowledge that you were the person who said that. But you've done so much more for the autism community. But if you would take us back to the beginning and tell us a little bit about your journey and how did you find yourself included in this community?
All right, sure. Well, taking it from the top, or you might say the bottom, however you look at it, things were pretty typical for me for the first 18 months. And then I was struck with the regressive autism bomb. And like with 30% of us on the spectrum, at that point, I lost functional communication, had meltdowns, withdrew from the environment. In a brief, I became a very severely affected autistic little child. There was so little known about autism in those days. So little known that it took my parents a whole year to find a place for diagnosis. And when they did, the doctors said, well, we've never seen such a sick child. You should send him to an institution. And fortunately, my parents, like we see ever increasing numbers of parents around the world, they advocated on my behalf. And they convinced the school to take me in about a year. And it was during that year, my parents implemented what we would today refer to as an intensive home-based early intervention program. And this was a program emphasizing music, movement, sensory integration, narration, and imitation. It probably looked like one of the more developmental approaches we have today, such as a floor time or RDI or Millimeth, and I see some aspects of daily life therapy as well. So what did my parents do? Well, first they tried to get me to imitate them. And imitation is a time-honored educational strategy. Everybody's done it. But for us autistic people, perhaps due to a difference in mirror neurons, especially when young, that wasn't working. So my parents flipped it around. And I saw as today's, we're talking about the word acceptance. You might say my parents accepted things were as they were. And that was the beginning of their transition from after becoming aware of autism. That's the first A of autism. I've got 4 A's of autism that I'm going to get to. Awareness of autism, where we've gotten pretty good at it. We've been at it for a generation. And we're pretty good at recognizing autism when we see it at home, in school, in employment, and in the community. And this awareness builds a solid foundation for that word that you're using, the acceptance word. And that is when we see parents, professionals, and autistic people ourselves. As we become aware of these autistic characteristics, we realize that these are things to be worked with as opposed to against. And that is the turning point into acceptance. These characteristics, they just are. They're neither good, they're not bad, they just exist. So let's find a way to work with them as opposed to against them. So my parents flipped it around and they imitated me. And once they did that, I became aware of them in my environment. And they were able to bring me along. And I believe the key implication is that as a prerequisite for doing solid and authentic work with an autistic person, you have to develop that trusting relationship first. Then you could move on. And
I love that. I love that. And so, and I love during the month. Oh, I'm sorry, you were saying?
go ahead.
Oh, during the month of April, we were, a lot of times people refer to April as Autism Awareness Month. And of course, Autism Society of America had proposed that we talk about autism acceptance. There are other organizations that like Autism Action. And, we were talking a lot during April about how there are many A words, and that pick the A word that most resonates to you. But I love that you talk about the 4 A's. So finish that off for us. So we start with awareness and we move to acceptance, but then there are other A's that we need to get to, correct?
Yeah, that's right. So there's a couple more to go. So acceptance. Let's take a look at an example, say in an educational situation. We have an autistic child who is not motivated to do mathematics for whatever reason it is. Maybe they're not good at it. Maybe they had bad experiences. Maybe they just rather do something else. So commonly what would happen is the child would be observed, and in particular observed for what interests the child. So an interest inventory would be taken. And it might be that this child lives to use a flight simulator on a computer. And that's what they go home and they do. They'll spend hours on the computer, and the kid's parents are always having to shoo the kid off so that they can use the computer themselves. So then commonly a plan will be developed where access to this preferred activity, special interest activity, is taken away. However, you can earn it back by doing math. And the idea is that the desire to do this particular activity motivates the child to do math. However, that's working against the characteristics of autism. If we understand the characteristics of autism, one of them being extremely widely varying skill sets. So in other words, we tend to be a study of extremes. The things we're interested in, we're incredibly interested in. The things we're good at, we're incredibly good at. The areas we need support, well, yeah, we need a lot of support. And there are a lot of challenges to being autistic. We must recognize that, we must remediate for them. However, we need to be looking at strengths and finding a way to use strength-based approaches for supporting people on the autism spectrum. So an example of a strength-based approach would be to turn away from looking at this child as being a series of deficits, disorder, and disability, and saying, well, you're not good at math, you're not good at this, but maybe we can fix them, to an abilities-based approach. Well, what can the child do? Well, they're fascinated with this flight simulator, so let's find a way to teach math through using a flight simulator. There's a lot of math involved in airplanes. And what this does is that sets the stage for the next A, 3. The third A is appreciation. So we haven't gotten to Autism Appreciation Month, but we'll get there. And what appreciation is, that's when we see autistic individuals being valued for the contributions we can make to society. And we are seeing this already in IT firms. Microsoft, Google, SAP, Apple, and others actively seek autistic people as their employees because they know that a number of us can do IT type work better and faster than anybody else. However, my question always is, when I hear about this autistic geekery, is what about everybody else? What about those of us who have skills in the arts or in physical fitness or writing or something else? And then also included in everybody else is, what about those of us who need more supports? So one thing that's in common with this autistic geekery stuff is that uh, you provide some support and training for the autistic individuals, not in IT, but everything else that goes into finding and maintaining employment, all of the hidden curriculum. And we also train the employers to better understand autistic people. And then we kind of let them loose and they do their thing and we provide support as needed. And I say we because this is something that I did with a colleague of mine, Robert Nassif, Dr. Robert Nassif, where we developed and delivered a 40-hour training program to not 40, but to a couple dozen autistic IT employed or just unemployed. And this was for SAP. SAP was planning on hiring half of them, but they ended up hiring them all. And now 5 years later or so, they're all working there except for one, because he moved to across the country. But anyways, back to those who are not IT geeks and those of us who maybe need more supports. I know of this fellow in Florida who he needs support in communication. He uses a communication device, but it's still challenging. He needs support with his schedule and transportation. However, he's got this curious interest or activity of taking clothes out of a dryer and folding them perfectly. I know many people who would like help with their laundry.
Me.
Yeah. Oh, he'd be happy to fly out to where you are and help you laundry. He'd do it in a moment, but you have to pay him to do it because that's his job.
Of course.
He spends all day in a hot laundromat pulling clothes out of a hot dryer, probably getting some kind of sensory input from how they feel, and folding them better and faster than anybody else. And he is appreciated for his contributions. And also equally important is this fellow enjoys what he's doing. He's productive and fulfilled. So those are examples of appreciation. And then the last A is action, which is the glue that keeps the other three A's together. Action in making sure we're recognizing autism as an educator or an employee or a community member, and in increasing numbers, autistic people ourselves, as we read about autism and wonder, well, gee, is this me? Yeah, I think it is. Now I'm gonna go get that confirmed with a formal diagnosis.
You know, it's so clear why everyone loves you, that you are the one thing that we can all agree on. I don't know if you feel that in your life, but I am able to get the bio back up enough to be able to look and to say some of the boards that you're on, because I want to talk a little bit about one in particular. You're a current board member of Autism Speaks, the Organization for Autism Research, American Occupational Therapy Foundation. You're a president emeritus of the Asperger Autism Network and on the advisory board of Autism Society. And you also serve on the advisory boards of AANE and other autism-related organizations. I mean, just that in and of itself is so remarkable, how many organizations you are involved with. But I'm just going to say this. We don't always in the autism community play well in the sandbox. That sometimes organizations struggle with others. And there are people within the autism community that have thoughts and feelings about certain organizations. And it can be very polarizing. But to see you, first of all, involved with all of those places and making it work between all of those places is inspirational. But the fact that everyone looks at you working with those organizations and is positive about it is remarkable. Like there's no one else who is able to do that, Stephen. So, I'm just glad. I wish we could all figure out your secret, but I think your secret is that it's you, that you bring rationality and civility to everything that you do, and everything that you say makes so much sense that it stops all of us in our tracks. Having said all of that, we have seen in recent years that the everyone is not always in love with certain organizations. And I want you to talk about the fact that you are on the board, you're a current board member of Autism Speaks. Talk about what your contribution is there and how you feel about that.
All right. Well, I feel good about being on the board of Autism Speaks. Otherwise, I would not have gotten on the board or would have left the board. I think they're doing good work. Certainly, they have a ways to go, and just like every organization, can improve. But they are moving in the right direction. They are moving towards. They're getting off of awareness and using it as a launch pad to acceptance. That is now in their mission statement, where it was changed from cure and elimination of autism to awareness and acceptance. Got to get them to the appreciation piece, but they'll get there.
And with you
And
there, I'm sure that they will.
Well, thank you.
Sorry, I interrupted.
But Autism Speaks has had a challenging history, and when they came onto the scene, they really were horrible, because they had a reaction very similar to what parents often have when they first learn that their child is diagnosed. And that is, okay, now we know what it is. They'll go on a massive fact-finding and research mission to find out, number one, the cause, and hopefully the cure for autism, because all they can see is that there's this horrible thing that's afflicting their child. And sure, that's what it can look like. If your child doesn't want to be held, is screaming when you try to console them, you can't communicate with the child, they're not eating properly, and there's all these challenging behaviors. So who wouldn't want to do something about that? However, I think there's a little bit of confusion between what autism is and perhaps some of the outward manifestations caused by the confusion of being autistic. So we take things such as those who have horrific digestive issues. Yeah, you've got to fix that. Someone who has sensory issues that they can't remain in their skin. You have to do something about that. Someone who is unable to communicate, you definitely got to fix that and find a reliable means of communication. So that was Autism Speaks when it started. It was a terrible way to come into the community. They had more money and power than anybody else due to financial connections with Bob Wright. And just like a parent, we're going to get this done, and nobody else has cured autism, but we're going to do it. And they seem to have the money and resources and influence. If anyone was going to do it, it was going to be them. So all of the protests and all of what was going on, that was needed at that time. However, as I got to know more people in Autism Speaks, I also saw that there were people who realized that autism was something that was here to stay, and they were accepting autism and developing programs and toolkits that suggested they understood that once autistic, always autistic, and now we're going to find a way to work with them. And that's when we started seeing toolkits on transition to adulthood, education, and various other things to support those of us on the spectrum in a lifelong manner. I remember some years, so I helped them with some of that because I thought it was good. Wasn't on the board, but I just volunteered to help them develop some of these materials. They also developed a self-advocacy toolkit. And if you didn't believe autism was here to stay, then why would you bother to develop a self-advocacy toolkit? So I remember asking a board member shortly, maybe only a year or two before I was asked to join the board, discussing with him that there probably should be an autistic person on the board. It doesn't have to be me, but it should be someone. If it's an organization about autism, it would be sort of like having the National Women's Organization run by all men. There's just something not right about that. So, and my response was, Well, for those on the board, you have to either give or get $250,000 a year, and we get enough information from the autistic people we know as it is. So not a terribly helpful answer. Well, then things changed. There was a new chair of the board, and he has an autistic son. And in talking with him, I learned that he didn't want to cure or eliminate people like his son. He just wanted his son to be happy. And as far as he knew, his son was happy and his family was happy with their son. And that's just how it should be. So after a period of time, they asked me if I would sit on their board. And I think that they were ready at that point. So I said, okay, I'll do it. It caused a lot of backlash from the autism community and still does at times. But I think really what's important is to just do what's right. And I think, at least for my style, I tend to do better change the inside as opposed to from the outside. There may be other people who are better at doing it that way. So that's what brings me to the board of autism.
I'm so glad that you're there. It makes me so happy to know that you're there. And we're running low on time, and I don't want to miss talking about this because you are someone with an advanced degree in looking at education and how we educate individuals on the autism spectrum, and give them every opportunity that they deserve. And looking at this circumstance with COVID, everybody has so many questions about how can we best help in our kiddos on the spectrum, our small children, school age children, our teens, and our adults coming out of COVID. What are your thoughts on all of this, Dr. Shore?
Well, there are three big things that come to mind. One is, and it's kind of the same as we went into COVID, as we all got booted out of our respective campuses, workplaces, and schools, and essentially got quarantined at home. And it made me realize that one important thing we need to do is make sure we keep schedules the same. Follow a schedule. Keep it as much as the same as possible. So in talking with Temple Grandin about this, she says she still gets up at 7:30 every morning. I actually get up at 7 o'clock. So we're both getting up in the sevens in the morning. She gets dressed and she writes for an hour or two. What I do is I get dressed and I exercise on my elliptical bike because I realize that there is no more incidental movement, or barely any. So I'm pretty active. I would ride my bicycle to school and then walk from between classrooms or offices doing my university type things, and all that was gone. Now it was just walking from, say, the bedroom to the office to do work. So I had to build in and be much more mindful of movement. So that meant spinning an elliptical bike for 90 minutes every other day. So that's one thing I did. And for young children on the spectrum, same thing. The morning schedule is all the same. However, there is no more waiting for the yellow school bus to take you there, or a taxi, or getting driven by your parents, or however you go to school. And we take out that picture of a bus, if you have a picture word schedule, and you replace it of a picture of the computer wherever it's located in the home where work is to be done. And school, even if it's on the computer, it's remote education, it still has a routine. So you mark down that routine. If you're not sure of what it is, contact your child's teacher or therapist and get details on their day. However, now we're slowly coming out of the pandemic, which means we have to switch up our routine back to going to school. So whatever adjustments we make them in that direction. So that's the schedule. Keep the schedule the same as much as possible. Whatever changes you have to make, communicate them as clearly as possible. So that's the second thing we need to do. Clear communication in the best way the autistic person understands, whether it's using words just like we're talking now, or it might be a list, It might be a picture schedule, picture word schedule, however that's done, just keep on doing that. And then finally, there's the third thing is taking care of yourself. So you must take care of yourself so that you can support the autistic person you're supporting. So if that means taking a bubble bath with a rubber ducky floats your boat, then that's what you do. If it means spinning an elliptical bike or some other exercise on a regular basis, that's what you'll do. If you find you're autistic, the person you're supporting, or if you're autistic yourself, suddenly getting involved in routines or repetitive behaviors, often referred to as stims, that you may have not done for a number of years, but suddenly they've returned. I think it's better to reframe these activities as self-regulatory or coping strategies. So if you need to carry around that old smelly used to squeeze for propane, carry it around. As long as it's not getting in the way or interfering, just do it. If you're suddenly getting involved in television series and binge watching, don't do too much, don't stay up all night. But if you're kind of getting back into it, then that's what you do. And that's the taking care of yourself piece.
I love absolutely all of that. And it's so great to have you here. I have to say that yesterday, Dr. Doreen Grant-Pichet was on the show, and she expressly asked that we give you her love and to say hello from her.
Oh, send my love and hello back to her.
She's a big fan of yours, as I think you know. And I was saying this morning, I'm so grateful to have you on this morning for so many reasons, but among them is the friend that introduced the two of us was my dear friend, Joanne Lara. And having you here makes me feel closer to her because she adored you. And I know that the two of you often lectured overseas together, and it would make her so happy to know that you're here with us. So I can't leave the show without saying that. But I also want to briefly touch on, you've got a number of books that people should know about, Dr. Shore. I mentioned at the start of the show that you have a book, College for Students with Disabilities, that is pivotal, I think, for those of us who have kids that are getting ready to go off to college or in college. That's really remarkable. Also, Beyond the Wall, Personal Experiences with Autism and Asperger's Syndrome, available. What other books would you like to reference, or where can we get those two books? Let's put it
All right.
way.
Well, speaking of books, Beyond the Wall has just recently been translated into Bangla, out in Bangladesh. And so I'm excited about that. It's been translated into a number of languages, maybe 7 or 8. I should count them up and see.
Wow.
So you can get that book. You can also get the College for Students with Disabilities book, which combines powerful stories of students with disabilities who are in college or have gotten through college, their experiences and their suggestions for success. And we combine that with the latest research contributed from student support organizations such as the Bridges to Adelphi program that supports autistic students, and also the program for students with disabilities. We have a contribution from them as well as people from other areas around the nation. There's also Understanding Autism for Dummies. And I guess the best thing to say is that I'm the dummy who wrote that book. And there is also Ask and Tell, Self-Advocacy and Disclosure for people on the autism spectrum, which is a book for and by autistic people regarding self-advocacy. Finally, where can you get these books? You can get them on my website, which is drstephenshore.com. So that's one place you can get them. You can always go to amazon.com and you can find them there. Or you can go directly to the publishers. Most of the books are published from Autism Asperger Publishing Company. I think now it's called AAPC Publications, is what it's called now. There's also a book from Jessica Kingsley, the college students with disabilities, is out of Jessica Kingsley. And the Dummies book is from Wiley Publishers.
Hey, well, thank you so much for being with us, and thank you for all the work that you do and all that you share with us, because you make things so clear. It's just a wonderful, wonderful message that you bring, and it's so appreciated. So thank you so much.
No, my pleasure.
All right. Well, we will look forward to having you back again. If we had more time, what I think what a lot of us would like to know is how you and your wife met and how that came to be. When is that book going to come out, Dr. Shore?
Well, there's a little bit of that in my Beyond the Wall book. And maybe we could do another episode where we talk about relationships, dating, and sexuality for autistic people.
I
You
would
get the
love to do
complete
that.
lowdown. All right.
All right. Let's do that. Thank you so much for being with us, though, today.
Oh, my pleasure.
All right. You have a great weekend.
Thanks, and you too.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for watching Autism Live. If you found anything helpful in this video, please give us a like. In fact, make sure that you smash that subscribe button on YouTube and give us a like on Facebook. You can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram for important updates. And please download our free podcast wherever you get your podcasts. See you next time. Until then, give your kiddos a hug from me and one for you too. Bye-bye for now. To subscribe, click here. And if you'd like to check out some more of our videos, click here.